This meeting is being recorded.
Shabbat Shalom, Baruch Hashem. This week's, I believe if I'm in the right parashot, we are in Shemini. It proves to be an interesting area of study. This is one of those parashots that you can use it to springboard into about 30 or 40 different areas of study if you're using the parties to study with. Now, the week's parashot is concerned, of course, with finishing up the dedication of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. In first reading in Vayikra, Leviticus, beginning in chapter 9, 1 through 16, there's an instruction that's given by Moshe to his brother Aharon. And Aharon assembles calves, rams, a goat, a lamb, an ox, and a meal offering. The offerings here, they use the word korbanot. Korban, of course, as everybody should be familiar, means to what? To draw near. Korbanot can either be counted as a plural of that, or the ot on the end could be a sign. So if they use it in the plural, because they have more than one animal, then they're content with that. If you use it as two words, the sign for drawing near, then it gives you a somewhat different premise, okay? Specifically, at the end of the consecration, it says that the Most High will appear to them today, this day. And that makes this parashot interesting. Everybody's in right standing. Everybody's echad, in unity. Everybody's following in loving obedience everything the Most High is speaking through Moshe. And so for this brief moment, everything's going pretty good. Now, when he says, today Yod-Heh Wahi will appear to you, and then they begin offering the korbanot as Moshe commanded. Now, it gets interesting, of course. In the beginning of the parashah, it was on the 8th day. Moshe called for Aharon, his sons, and the elders of Israel. Who are the elders of Israel? Anybody know?
Firstborn.
Father.
Yes.
Firstborns.
Firstborn. Who said that? Mark?
Patrick.
Good deal. Now, you notice it differentiates. It says a young calf is a sin offering, a ram is a burnt offering, unblemished. And then it continues. They could go to the sin offering, a calf and a lamb in their first year, unblemished, as a burnt offering, an ox and a ram as a peace offering, to offer before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, and a meal offering mingled with oil. For today, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh will appear to you. So they took what Moshe commanded to the front of the Ohel, the tent of meeting. And then, beyond the elders who had been invited, the entire community approached. And it doesn't say how close they approached. And stood before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Now, he hadn't appeared yet, but they're standing before him. So, either the cloud or the fire is going on right at this point in time. They get some sense of his presence. His presence has been revealed, even if they're not getting a visual. So you need to take a moment with this to recognize for the first time, they're not only feeling his presence in what's being revealed, but they're going to see something of his presence. So they're going to be matured a little bit today with how the Most High is choosing to reveal himself as the Mishkan is just being brand new and being used in a way that it's supposed to. It is a means, it is a juncture for the Most High's name to have a place to live among us, as well as for him to walk among us in the camp, and for him to reveal himself in his presence when he chooses to, not only to Moshe and Aharon, but to our people. So we see this coming together here. We're going to see a couple of interesting things. The entire community approached, stood before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Moshe says, and every time you see Moshe said, in Hebrew it's Vayomer, and he spoke regarding Moshe. Vayomer is a study within itself because of the countless times you see it all through Torah. So we have an extreme pattern of the Most High speaking to Moshe, to Aharon, even to Yehoshua as Moshe's apprentice later. We have an extreme example here and pattern of this activity going on of the Most High speaking. This is the declaration that Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh has commanded you to do. In English, they say, for the glory of the Most High shall appear to you. But in Hebrew, that word glory is actually kavod, honor. Now, in studies that have been done previously, and not even by myself, the studies on this kavod show that it's such an extended living part of the Most High. It's why he doesn't share his honor with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
The right hand of power has his own honor. Some people have tried to associate the patterns dealing with the Most High's honor and the honor of the right hand of power being so singular is individualized, similar to a shadow or similar to the aura or vibration that a person exudes. In verse 7, again, Moshe says to Aharon, approach the altar, prepare your sin offering, your burnt offering, and atone for yourself and for the people. So this is the first time this is actually coming out to where Aaron is told by his brother, atone for yourself and atone for the people. So what is he atoning for? We've gone over this before. Anybody remember what the sons of Aharon atoned for?
Sin.
No. No
No.
man can atone for sin or forgive sin.
Guilt.
Yes,
Oh,
the
yeah.
guilt.
Yeah, the guilt.
Now, this is one of the areas that people really get up in arms about because they don't understand how the sons of Aharon have been given to atone for the guilt. But you'll learn atoning for the guilt can become quite important. Then he says, then prepare the offering of the people and atone for them. So first it says atone for yourself and for the people. Then it says prepare the offering of the people and atone for them. This is as Yod-Heh-Wahi has commanded. So we even see here that atoning for ourselves as sons of Aharon and atoning for others is commanded by the Most High. Aharon approached the altar, slaughtered the sin offering calf which he had. Aharon's sons brought forward the blood to him. He dipped his finger in the blood, put it on the corners of the altar, and spilled the blood on the base of the altar. Most people don't consider how important the putting the blood on the corners of the altar and the blood on the base of the altar is. But it's brought out here fairly openly. And then he burns up the fat, the kidneys, and the appendage of the liver from the sin offering on the altar, as Yod-Heh-Wahi had commanded Moshe. He burned the flesh and the skin and fire outside the camp. So we also see the sequence is going on. Okay. So it gets to be interesting. He
Rabbi,
slaughtered the.
quick question, please.
Okay.
And I just had this from last week's parashah, but when it talks about the diaphragm, does that include the lungs when they were taken?
No.
No. Okay. I was just
The lungs.
curious.
The lungs are considered a cavity rather than an organ like the rest of them,
Okay.
because within the lung space we have the bronchus tree, the pleura, and so we don't actually have a solid organ there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, that's interesting. Now, it repeats things here. As he slaughters the burnt offering, the Aharon's sons brought the blood to him, and he dashed it on all sides of the altar. Then presented the burnt offering to him in its pieces with the head. He burned them upon the altar. He washed the entrails of the legs and burnt them upon the altar. You notice these parts are particular that he washes before he puts on the altar. He offered the people's offering. He took the sin offering, go to the people, slaughtered it, and made it sin offering service. So you notice there's a difference between the slaughtering and ordering, placing the portions of the animal on the altar in a particular way, and then it establishes a service for that particular offering. In this case, it's a sin offering service. Okay. as with the first one. He brought the burnt offering and prepared it according to what had been commanded. Okay,
Hey, Rabbi, I got a question.
you have a question.
Yes,
We
sir.
can refer this to the local rabbi if you like.
What's the purpose for the blood being put on the horns of the altar?
It doesn't say horns of the altar. Though when we refer to the horns, we're normally referring originally to what's within the most set apart places, or the Holy of Holies. The actual corners of the ark are considered the horns. If we talk about horns of the altar, we would be talking about the jutting out portions of the altar on the corners and that are closest to us.
Okay,
But
because
it
my
doesn't
name,
translate well into English, so it's not always called horns of the altar.
okay, all right.
But you posed an interesting questions because those corners have specific purpose. Primary, of course, receiving the blood there as well as the base. And it's got a couple of other purposes. And we may get to that sooner or later.
Well, I've heard it. The only reason I ask is because I've heard it from. I don't even know. It wasn't anybody. I know it wasn't a Jewish guy. But as it being a used as a like a record that the corners of the altar, the purpose for the blood was for that, was like a recording of, well, they didn't forgive sin, but he called it a sin for the recording of the sin. But it would have to have been a record. If it was that, it would have been recording for the guilt, if that's correct. That's why I was bringing up. That's why I asked the question, because I don't know.
Your assumption is incorrect.
Okay.
Try to remember something. There's an assumption here, so maybe I should try to clarify this a little bit. The Kohanim, they atone for the guilt.
Right.
They put blood on the corners of the altar and the base of the altar.
Right.
Now, we already know that blood on the ground has an ability to it. What is that? What is the ability of the blood from the ground? Anybody remember?
Call out,
Say again?
call out.
Yes, to call out or cry out. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
Now, so you don't recall different places, Patrick, where it says that the blood of the innocent cried out from the ground where it had been spilled?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
but-
only an example.
Abel. Says his
Uh-huh.
blood is crying out to the Most High.
Yes, that's not the only reference. Yes.
Sure. That's that's the most,
Now, so these animals that were used for these offerings, sin offering, burnt offering, etc., when their blood is put on the corners of the altar and the base of the altar, what do you think their blood is doing?
calling out.
It's becoming a witness from the owner of the offering to the Kohanim and to the Most High.
Okay.
That's the reason it's put there. It verifies. Say again. You had a comment, Hannah?
That wasn't me, that was the computer.
Oh, well, That's an energetic computer being a student and having a comment. Okay. Now, if you consider the Most High has put in place a pattern to which he can receive from more than one source, because the Cohen who's receiving the offering and the blood itself give how many witnesses?
Two.
A minimum of 2 witnesses. Yes. If you have more than one Cohen working the altar, then you have more than one. You have 3 or 4 witnesses. Okay.
Mhm.
So this is all happening at the same time. So with that blood being put on the corners of the base of the altar, the witness of the Cohen. Say again. Is that me?
The echo on the phone.
Okay.
I
That's
apologize.
you, Hananiah.
Yeah, I have bad signal. So every time it rings, the computer tells me it's recording.
Oh,
Yeah, you might want to
Okay.
mute yourself too. And it'll stop.
Say again.
she was saying that maybe if Hananiah muted his phone, it would help.
Oh, I was just thinking about turning the volume down. Okay. I am not a good information source for that problem. So then from there, what do we have happening? We have from verse 15, he offered the people's offering, and he took the sin offering, go to the people, slaughtered it, and made it its sin offering service. You might want to keep that in mind for the service of each kind of offering. As with the first one, he brought the burnt offering and prepared it according to instruction. Torah. He brought the meal offering, filled his palm from it, and burnt it up on the altar, besides the morning burnt offering. He slaughtered the ox and the ram, the peace offering of the people. Aharon's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the sides of the altar. As for the fats from the ox and from the ram, the fat tail, the fat covering the kidneys and the liver's appendage, he placed the fats on the breast, and he burnt up the fats on the altar. Aharon waved the breast and the right thigh as a wave offering before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, as Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh had commanded Moshe. Now, we get into a very specific area, something that most people have not understood, even good students. Aharon raised his hands toward the people and blessed them. This is after the atonement. Then he came down from making the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. Moshe and Aharon entered the Ohel, the tent of meeting, then came out and blessed the people a second time. And the honor of Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh appeared to all the people. A fire emanated from before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh and consumed the burnt offering and the fats of the altar. All the people saw, they praised and fell on their faces. So, did they actually see the Most High? They saw evidence of his kavod, his honor. Okay? This is very important because it doesn't occur on a daily basis. Now, after the atonement, Aaron and later on his sons did the same thing after giving atonement to the people. what did the people receive? A blessing, a bracha. Okay. This has remained as a part of what we do since then. When the Most High, who actually does the atoning through us, and then he uses us to administer his blessings, every time an offering is given, atonement is given back. And then when we see each other, the blessings that have been prepared are received by the people, individually and together. And so here is one of these proof verses that show how we're instructed to do so.
Question.
Question.
Do we know what time of year it was during this specific event?
Yeah?
Don't recall it mentioning in the Parsha.
Well, has it been a year out yet since we left? Do you recall?
No,
Let's-
I don't think so.
Let's put the pattern together a little bit. We pretty well know the time that we left, because the time we left, we celebrated the first Pesach by commandment. And when we left during the beginning of the week of unleavened bread, because it had to be Nisan when we left. So we know. Are you following what I'm saying? It had to be after the time of the golden calf experience. Are you seeing the pattern of how to do this?
Sure, I'm with you. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to let you do a little bit of calculating there and get back with me on what you find. Okay.
Okay.
Now, as we move to chapter 10, we go from a place where everybody is a Chad, everybody's in agreement, everybody is before the Most High. They have just experienced his kavod, his fire on the altar. Now, what is remarkable about the Most High's fire on the altar? Anybody? Did the Most High's fire burn the wood on the altar? So Michael shakes his head, and everybody else shakes their head, huh? Okay, well, that's correct. His fire did not burn the wood on the altar. It specifically burnt what?
The
The offering and all of the offering, including the blood.
Back.
Now, the effect of his fire burning the offering, what did it produce for him?
Sweet aroma.
Yes. Does Hannah remember that? Does Hannah remember that? I guess she's depending on everybody seeing her bobble her head there, huh?
Yes.
Now, do you remember what you discovered about the word sweet and aroma there? Do you recall it all?
Say it again.
The word they use for sweet. Do you remember the definition of what you discovered? You don't recall offhand, huh? Most interesting. You recall that that word sweet was actually setting apart Most High
Hmm.
for receiving what we gave?
Tom. Like Tamim. Make it period.
Yes. And what did that produce?
Kadosh.
Say again, please.
Kadosh. Kadesh.
A setting apart. So it was set apart for Aharon and his sons to do these things, and his kavod appeared. If the fire came out from him without burning the wood, and then that sweet aroma was that kadosh process that the Most High had in accepting what they were doing. That's what the sweet aroma actually was. His kavod producing that kadosh, set apartness, in receiving what was given
And that made it acceptable.
him. Yes. So what we're seeing here is layers of set apartness from beginning to end, beginning from us to the Most High. So it teaches us that just because we are set apart from the people to do our work doesn't mean we're set apart enough to approach Him. That 3 days that we keep an offering secluded to check it for blemishes and problems is another layer of setting apart. Then, when it's slaughtered according to the way we do and quartered and set upon the altar, it's another setting apart process. Then, when the fire is there, that's an additional setting apart process. The blood on the sides of the altar, the corners of the altar, and the base of the altar is again a setting apart. Then when that fire hits it, again, a final setting apart. It goes in a transition from flesh to what?
Ash.
That final setting apart process, does an animal, is it a spirit being within it? Is an animal considered a nefesh, a living creature? Can't have both ways, guys. Is it one or the other?
No.
Is an animal considered a nefesh?
No, because it's
Remember
not
what
his
it-
image, it's made his breath. It has his breath. So it has his breath, but it doesn't have
Yes.
his image.
You guys, Michael, do you guys
Being
recall that
born.
a nefesh is a combination of us as a spirit being and being of light, a house.
Yep.
That togetherness, that combined together makes us a living creature, nefesh.
All right. That's
Okay.
the 2 times being born.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so it has the Most High's breath animating it. But what is it lacking? It's lacking because it is not a spirit being from the Most High placed in a house. So how do we know that animals are able to have a spirit where we can recognize them as an animal? What's the difference between us as a being of light and the way an animal is made? Anybody know?
He said his image he put into man.
That is correct. What is that image that he put into us?
Light.
Light, that is true. Can you do anything more with it? Or are you struggling?
When he redeemed us, the Goel I knew, which is his fruit of the spirit, the Ruach.
When he made us as a being of light, he also had to give us a portion of that fruit of the spirit, a portion of him. And when it says, let us make man in our image, that had to be with the right hand of power, being in agreement with him, being echad.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
Everybody with me? So the image of the Most High was not put into the animals.
Right.
So they recognize him. And us having that image is the way the Most High designed us to be able to have that dominion to rule over animals. Everybody with me?
Yep.
And I see your eyes darting back and forth. Are you processing, or you just gotta take some time with this?
All good.
Okay. All right. Now, we're going from all of this, Echad, to chapter 10.
Mhm.
The sons of Aharon, they had to have some excitement, exuberance. They couldn't contain themselves. They took each his fire pan, put fire in them, and placed incense on it. They offered before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh an unauthorized fire that he did not command them.
Mhm.
A fire emanated from Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, consumed them, and they died before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Then Moshe says to Aharon, now this is important to understand, because very few people get this part. Regarding this, Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, blessed be he, has spoken. I will be sanctified, set apart through those who are close to me, and I will get honor in the presence of all the people. Now, please understand something. We just went over the different layers of set apartness that are made available to us and revealed to us. And then he says here, Moshe says, from the Most High, I will be set apart, sanctified through those who are close to me, and I will get honor in the presence of the people. This is probably one of the most important parts of this parasha, where because of the death of these two presumptuous, excited, eager to please young men who are coveting the sons of Aharon, it cost them their lives, being presumptuous before the Most High without doing what he said.
Mhm.
This is an extremely important lesson to learn. And we learn from this that we don't do things before the Most High, even what he's ordered to be done, in our own strength, our own work. He does not accept our own works. He accepts what he commands and what he works through us,
Right.
which is why I went through the sequence of the set apartness from the animals being presented, the animals being accepted, the animals being slaughtered, quartered, placed on the altar, and then being burned. Each is an area of set apartness to the Most High. But here we have sons of Aharon, Kohanim in their office, who are already set apart, and they want to be more pleasing,
Mhm.
but they did it from their own heart instead of the Most High stirring the heart.
Right.
This is a very important thing to understand. This is one of the reasons that we regard the Most High in the way that we do. We can't be like a little child and go pull up a blossom by its roots, take it to a parent, and say, I got this for you. It's what the Most High requires of us. And when we pray, if He accepts the prayer and He accepts what we want to do, then He will work it through us so it's acceptable to Him. But just us deciding to do something ourselves, to put something together ourselves and say, look what I made for you. If it didn't come from His stirring of the heart, He will find that unacceptable. Because us without the Most High's activity through His Spirit within us, He has a problem with us. There has to be that full circle. Is this making any sense?
Yeah.
So, this is the reason we learned the lesson in Yehoshua when Moshe's apprentice became the leader after Moshe. Okay? Always go to the Most High first. Always go to the Most High first. There is no exception to that. So if we get excited, if we get sad, if we get angry, the first thing we're supposed to do before we make a decision, before we act on any decision, we go to Him first. And He decides how He's going to receive us. He decides what He's going to put on our lips. He decides how to stir our hearts. He starts working through us even as we go before Him. One of the reasons that it becomes important to us is because if somebody's been particularly wonderful, if somebody's been particularly ugly, sometimes we have to ask for a particular prayer for Him to put on our heart and put on our lips that particular person or that event that they're involved in. Because what we know in prayer may seem sufficient to us. If it seems sufficient to us, it's the Most High stirring the heart to let us know that is not a prayer that's sufficient for Him to receive from us. So this is one of these areas where we see an example of how the Most High will not be pleased with us doing something in our own energy, in our own decision, in our own workings. So we want to know how to please Him. We go before Him and say, how might I please you? What do you need to work through me? What does your hand need to extend to me to do so that what comes of my life is pleasing to you? There's two things that we need to know about our activity and our thinking and our words. One, it has to be pleasing to Him. And one other thing, He needs to be able to get kavod, honor, from what we do, from our life. What we say, what we think, and what we do. All three need to be congruent. They need to be echad. And He can get honor from our life in those moments, those instances. Is this making any sense?
Mhm.
And with each one of us, as we go before Him, and we can do our morning prayers, we can do our evening prayers first for the day, and then we can do our afternoon prayers. Now, there are 5 times we're supposed to go before Him every day. Most everybody knows about the 3 prayers a day, but there are 2 other prayers that we're supposed to do every day. And that is in accordance with the offering system. We have evening, morning, and afternoon offerings based on what we're taught from the Michigan and its service. The other 2 are the first offering of the day and the last offering of the day. And they are lambs, 1 year old or less.
Right.
They're like bookends to all the other offerings.
Mhm.
Now, those, when we honor the prayers before Him, not necessarily our individual prayers, okay, or when we intercede for somebody, these are different areas of prayers, okay, but our first and last inspirational prayer of the day has to come from Him exciting our heart, inspiring us, which is why it would be called inspirational, is because He's the one that would inspire it with the movement of His Spirit, His fruit of the Spirit. And so, in that first offering of the day, the last offering of the day, okay, these are called actually the continual burnt offerings. Okay, so we understand from this and study, this is the source of our inspirational prayer that individually comes from our own hearts. So we even have to ask Him, what is in my heart? Teach me, reveal to me, show me what I need to say and how I need to express this to you, so that how do you inspire me so that you receive from me and my heart, my life in this moment, what is acceptable to you. This is the source of inspirational prayer. Is everybody understanding what I'm saying? In the individual prayer by itself that most people call inspirational prayer is unacceptable to Him because it didn't come around through us back to Him. It only came from us. No matter how much we love Him with fruit of the Spirit, as we get back to Him with it, no matter what else is going on and how we belong to Him, He inspires us. And as He inspires us and we respond, then we get more from Him and more of Him. Now, when it comes to other kinds of prayer, such as intercessory prayer, praise prayer, because that's what praise is a form of prayer. Okay, that will still come after we receive fruit of the Spirit from Him, because it's that fruit of the Spirit we receive from Him that gives us the inspiration from Him for the intercessory prayer and the praise prayers. Everybody following me? It is still from Him, and it has to be full circle, because that fruit of the Spirit has to act like a dipper and dips into us as a being of light, a spirit being. And then He sees if we are acceptable in that moment before He receives it back. Everybody with me? Now, it took the deaths of Moshe's, Aharon's sons, forgive me, I had to make that correction, in order for us to learn this lesson. Anybody have any comment to this point? This is one of the real reason that we are taught to seek Him, to seek His kingdom and His righteousness first, to always be seeking His face, to always be seeking Him, to be drawn close to Him, to draw near. The only way we draw near is through an offering, one way or the other. That offering has to be matched by how He inspires the heart. If we have not opened our heart to Him, He won't be able to inspire it. If we make our heart hard by not forgiving sin, if we make our heart hard by staying in that sin, if we make our heart hard by not getting atonement, if we make our heart harder by staying in these states, if you've had atonement and you've had forgiveness of that sin and you go back and do it again and again and again, I got to tell you, atonement and forgiveness is not a permission slip to go back and do it again. Even Even in the Brit Hadashah, they are taught, go and sin no more. Sin is trespassing or disobedience to Torah. Torah is his teaching, instruction, and direction. So what he has taught us, we're going against that. That's sin. What he teaches us, what he instructs us, the direction he takes us. If we go against any one of those three or any combination, we are breaking faith with him and we are sinning. And if we go against his teaching, go against his instruction, go against his direction, against another person, we are sinning against another person. If we go against his teaching, go against his instruction, go against his direction, even with ourselves, we have sinned against ourselves. And when we sin, when we do this against ourselves, against another person, or against him, we incur guilt. That's why we need the atonement. And once we're atoned for, then we should be as quick as we can in asking him for forgiveness. We're going against his instruction, his teaching, his direction, because that's what sin is. If we disobey Torah, if we trespass against Torah, the definition of Torah is teaching, instruction, direction. Is this becoming any more clear? The offering system with the Mishkan was the first step in providing us the ways and means of being in good standing with him, right standing. Anybody have any comments? Get your attention a little bit, huh? What do you think, Michael?
I'm with you.
No comments so far, huh?
Not yet.
Okay. How about you, hon? Any comments?
Hey, can see the Korban between the Mishkan, Ohel, like this. Here, him, us. Offer
Each has their designated purpose, yes.
here. And that's what's required for us to draw near.
Okay. Now, is everybody understanding now, from what I've just said, why you cannot say the Torah is the law, like from the Greek nomos? Okay. It won't fit. It's not an administrative or municipal law where, okay, we don't like the traffic on this road getting fast, so we're going to put a traffic light here, or we're going to put a stop sign here. And it wasn't there before, but now it is. That's one of man's laws, administratively, municipally, okay, federally. So you can't call that his teaching, instruction, and direction. Conversely, his teaching, instruction, and direction are not laws. The closest you could come to calling any of his Torah a law would be one of his judgments.
Mitzvahs.
No, it's commandment.
Mhm.
Now, just keep this in mind, okay, as we go on here. Now, any questions thus far? No questions. Did we lose somebody in all of this? Hananiah, Mark, you guys still with us? Anybody have any comments or questions? You with us still and everything? Does it make any sense what I've said?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Hananiah, Patrick, you guys okay?
Sure, I'm good.
Okay. Well, if you're good, you're better than me. I ain't got that close to him yet. Now, so this makes sense to you now. Okay, good. Moshe called for Mishael and El-Saphan, sons of Uziel, Aharon's uncle, and said to them, approach and carry away your brothers from in front of the sanctuary to outside the camp. It said that they approached and carried them in their tunics to outside the camp, as Moshe had spoken. Moshe said to Aharon and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his sons, do not let your heads grow unshaven, and do not tear your garments, so that you should not die, and he will be angry with the entire community. And your brothers, that Israel, shall bemoan the fire which Yodhewahe has burnt. Do not leave the entrance of the Ohel, lest you die, for Yodhewahe's anointing oil is on you. They acted in accordance with Moshe's word. Now, with what he spoke, instructions to remove the remains, instructions to Aharon, there is a sequence and a pattern there that he set up for those in obedience and those in disobedience. Now, Michael, it's 3:20 already. So everybody needs to take that break. We'll get back to this.
Sounds good idea to me. Let's go ahead and take a break. 40-minute break. We can meet back at 4 o'clock. Is that sufficient for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Baruch Hashem. I need to go over a couple of things a little bit more. As we were in chapter 9, and around verse 13, when Moshe told Aharon, this is what Yodhewahe meant when he said, through those near to me, I show myself set apart and gain honor before all the people. Now, the part of that phrase that I want you to get perhaps a better or greater understanding of is whenever he says, through those near me. Okay?
10 and 3.
That's 10 and 3? Okay. Making mistakes is not beyond me. You are right. I am correct at 10 and 3. Now, through those near me, the Most High is the one that determines who is near to him. He's provided a pattern. He's provided a sequence of how we get near to him, how we get close to him. Anybody remember what that is? There's that head wiggling again.
He calls us and we say, Hineni.
That's a good start. What can you do with that? Okay. Teacher Hannah, you raising your right hand? Is that a kin yes for the hard of hearing? Go ahead.
He knocks. He knocks. And we have to respond. Then he knocks. Keeps knocking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he doesn't knock and keep knocking to get in. Once he's in, he turns around and tells us to knock and keep knocking on the door.
Okay, reverse.
Remember the
Forgive me.
conundrum? When he's wanting to bring, when he's got us trying to come to him, he's knocking on the door until we let him in.
Mm-hmm.
Once he's inside and he commands the Ruach HaKodesh to do its work, and once the activity of the Ruach is producing and reproducing fruit of the Spirit that starts growing within us, and as we grow, he starts telling us to knock and keep knocking on the door that he is inside of us. And then once we've grown and matured enough in that fruit of the Spirit, as we're continually knocking on the door, as it teaches us in 2 Peter chapter 1, as we grow and mature in fruit of the Spirit, and it grows and matures us from verse 3 all the way up to verse 10, then 11 and 12 shows how he finally opens that door when he finds us acceptable and offers us an entrance into the kingdom. But that's one of his primary purposes in being salvation, is he provides us the ways and means with salvation to grow in the Spirit, grow in the fruit of the Spirit, to the point to where he chooses to when we're acceptable, and then he offers us an entrance into the kingdom. So yes, it does work that way. So it is those that are growing and maturing in fruit of the Spirit that are getting to a point to where they can be near to him, close to him. Because when it says, I will be set apart through those who are close to me, you got to be one of those that are close to him for that to happen. And once he feels that set apartness returned to him,
Excuse me.
then it says he's honored in the presence of all the people. Those in the house of Yaakov, those in the house of Israel. Now, Hannah, I have a question for you. Do you happen to recall the reference that I gave you? Where, when we're teaching the house of Yaakov, the Kohanim are to drink wine? And whenever they instruct the house of Israel, they are told not to? You're pointing to him for the reference?
Rega. Por favor, s'il vous plaît.
Well, I don't think anybody else besides me is going to get all that, but okay. Now, Michael,
Yes.
everybody who comes in contact with even the idea of the Most High, one of the first things that they want to do, and that is because of the Most High stirring it up in us, is to be like him. It even says so concerning the Anointed One in the flesh, salvation. Okay? It says we are to mimic him. Okay? Right. So one of the things that happens to us as fruits of the Spirit continue to be given birth in us and continue to grow in us, and it grows us, is it changes our direction, changes our thinking to where in seeking him, the more that we seek him, the more we're looking for him, his kingdom, his righteousness. In order to do that, what starts happening to us? We become like-minded with him. We are slowly becoming in agreement with him, echad. As we become echad and we draw close to him, then this statement that's being made as a reference begins to make more sense.
Which statement?
Oh. That I will be set apart or sanctified through all those close to me,
Oh,
and
okay.
I will gain honor in the presence of all the people.
Okay.
Of course, he's only talking about the people who have achieved the point of being near him.
Sure.
It also works in concept with actually knowing him, where the Anointed One makes a very concerted statement in Matthew that it says all authority has been given to him in heaven and earth, and it follows with that he's the only one that knows the Father, and those whom he chooses to reveal the Father to.
Right.
It's a very interesting statement to be able to connect to other references, because it does not give you any clue in and of itself as to when he will choose to reveal the Father. A lot of people make a lot of assumptions about that, but you really got to connect the verses together for it to begin to make sense. If you notice in reading all through Torah and all through the prophets and even the writings, you discover how important the Most High set apartness is to it. Even from the first time we see it, where Moshe is approaching the bush that doesn't burn with fire, and he's told, take your sandals off, for the ground that you're standing on is set apart. So any place where his presence is at becomes what? Set apart. Any offering that he would accept becomes what?
Set apart.
Set apart. And even is capable of becoming more set apart. You have an offering that we're taught that is the most set apart of all the offerings. And that if anybody comes close and even touches the altar of the offering, they become set apart.
The continual
But we
burn.
may still have a few more things to learn about the offering system. But we're starting to get there. Today's the first time I've been able to teach this extensively so far on the offering system with the Mishkan of the Tabernacle in more than 20 years.
Wonderful.
Lets us know the times that we're getting close to.
Yeah.
Again, before we go any farther, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Rabbi, is that due to interest or is that due to people being indifferent to what you're teaching?
Neither one, actually. It is based on the Most High telling me to be quiet at times.
Oh, okay.
As you've seen in the past, when the Most High tells me to be quiet and sit down, that's what I do. I'll say, that's all for today. I sit down.
Oh, for sure. We're just
Yeah,
getting a good part of the lesson. And then, what happened?
Yep.
So I needed to go over that just a little bit more to make sure it was better understood. Okay. The other thing about this that you need to understand is when Moshe instructs Aharon and he says to him, not to mourn the two that died by rending their garments or leaving their hair unshorn. and not to go outside the Ohel, the tent of meeting. And then he instructs Aharon that he and his sons must not drink wine or other intoxicants when they enter the Ohel, the tent of meeting, so as to distinguish between the sacred and the profane.
Right.
Now, the verse, the reference that Han is presently looking for, is an instruction for the house of Yaakov that when we're teaching them, we are to drink wine. So, it also says in another reference that the house of Yaakov is meant for destruction, and the house of Israel to be insulted.
Right.
Now, that being said, you can see how, as I shared with you earlier, the different areas in the offering system and the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, has different areas of set apartness. So you can also see where it says there has to be a way to distinguish between the sacred and the profane. And so he says during the service of the offerings, that we are not to drink wine or other intoxicants when we enter the Ohel, the tent of meeting.
Right.
It does not say that in regard to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, only for the Ohel, the tent of meeting. And yet it's the same structure. Gives you a moment to think there, huh? Now, he gives us this to see in the service of offerings. Now remember, there's lots of different kinds of offerings. We have the classes of offerings that are there for the tent of meeting, the Ohel, and then we have other offerings. Now I'm going to read this as we mention it for you guys to look it up and see what you can get from it, and then we'll discuss it at a later time. In chapter 10, it mentions the elevation offering,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the thigh of the gift offering. So see what you can discover about the elevation offering. And where does it fit within the 5 classes of offerings that are generally used in the Ohel? And we have a disagreement in verse 16 through 20 of chapter 10 between Aharon and Moshe. Now, this is a very interesting exchange, and it's caused people to make a lot of assumptions. Moshe has inquired about the goat of the sin offering and was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar when he learned that it had already been burned and not eaten in a set-apart area. Aharon answered Moshe, well, see, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh have approved? Now, if you take and break this down by segment, to most people not understanding a Israeli or Hebrew culture, and specifically not having a good understanding of the offering system, they don't know what this means. Now, Moshe's question is, why did you not eat the sin offering in the set-apart place where it is most holy? He gave it to you to bear the iniquity of the community, to atone for them before Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Surely none of its blood was brought into the sanctuary. Certainly you should have eaten it in the sanctuary as I commanded. So this gets really interesting here because he sets up a premise. You didn't eat it in a set apart place because it is set apart. He gave it to you to bear the iniquity of the community. Now, the sons of Aharon, let me put this before John for a second, so we're all on the same sheet of music. John, if you have any awareness or any understanding of it, when the sons of Aharon would atone for people as they were commanded to, do you have any idea what they were atoning for?
I would think they must have worshipped some foreign gods, some gods other than the Most High, than the Lord.
No, it says whenever people would bring an offering to the entrance of the tent of meeting, that the sons of Aharon would atone for the people for their offering before it was put on the altar.
But for some reason, they didn't atone for the sins.
They never atoned for the sins. Do you know what they were atoning for?
No, I don't.
Okay. This is very common among a lot of people. I'm not singling you out
Yeah.
just for fun. Okay. I just want to let people see that sometimes it is unknown. Do you remember a time whenever the anointed one, salvation, Yeshua, was approached and he was asked a question? We all know that no man can forgive sin. So what is your authority to forgive sin? How do you do that? You remember the question?
Jesus said, first of all, something of David, was it of God or was it of man? And they got together in a huddle and scratched their heads. And if we say this, he'll say, then why don't you believe me? And if we answer such and such way, the people will get angry at us. And so they said, we don't know. And then Jesus said, well, I won't tell you then by what authority I do these things. Was that the reference you had, Ma?
Yes. Now, I would ask you if it's possible, while we're recording these online studies, if there's a way in your heart you could refrain from using the invented name that you use often and stay with salvation, Yeshua. It might help for unknown people listening. Is that possible?
All right, I'll refer to him in Yeshua in your presence.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Now, when this fellow approached Yeshua, he said, we all know that no man can forgive sin. So it was common knowledge from ancient times that no man would have the power or authority to forgive sin. The only reason I make that reference is to hone in on what the Most High gave Aharon and all of his sons and generations of them to atone for, because they were not atoning for sin. So do you have any idea what you said? You don't know what they would be atoning for.
I guess I still don't get it.
It's okay. I'm going to slow down on what I'm saying just so that there's a better understanding.
Okay.
Okay. All throughout Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, it's repeatedly there for the Cohen to atone. He atones in many different ways, but specifically there's an atonement that is done. Okay. Says he will atone for the altar. They will atone for the tent of meeting, the Ohel. They will atone for the offerings. They will atone for themselves. And so specifically, what is being atoned for is guilt. We know this by the very definitions of sin and guilt. We go by Hebrew definitions. The definition of sin is trespassing or disobedience to Torah. Torah's definition is teaching, instruction, and direction, rather than what is commonly used from the Greek as law. The word nomos from the Greek in law is not a word that would be used for teaching or instruction or anything from a one true and living Elohim, because the Greek society and history is pantheistic. They do not have a word for a one true living Elohim, and they don't have a word for instructions that would come from a one true living Elohim. So I'm just sharing with you as a background for a moment.
Okay.
Now, since even in his time, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they all knew no man could forgive sin. We know that the atonement had nothing to do with forgiving sin. The definition of sin is trespass or disobedience to Torah. Okay? Now, the definition of guilt is that which is worthy of execution or death. Do you see the differences in the
Yeah.
definitions?
Yeah.
Now, in the Brit Hadashah, where it says that the wages of sin are what?
Yes.
Yes, but there's nothing in the definition of sin that would give you a premise for sin causing death. Because it says disobedience or trespass against Torah. The definition of Torah, teaching, instruction, and direction. It was given by the Most High. But it also teaches in Exodus and Numbers that when we sin against one another, that we incur guilt and we break faith with the Most High. Okay? And most hundreds of different translations and editions, it'll say the same thing, sometimes with synonyms. And when we sin against one another, we incur guilt from the sin, and we break faith with the Most High, which would mean we're not in good standing or right standing with Him once we sin. And so the atonement that the sons of Aharon would do and still do is for the guilt. And we're very quick to tell people, whatever sin that he would bring back to your mind, that is the sin that you need to ask forgiveness for immediately. Whatever sins he brings back to mind, instead of just saying, forgive me for all of my sins, where you may seem like you don't remember or you're clueless as to what sins those be, then we ask forgiveness so that we can give forgiveness for whatever he knows that we need forgiveness for. And as part of our ongoing conversation with him, please let me know what I need to ask forgiveness for. And it'll be something from disobeying or trespassing against his Torah, teaching, instruction, direction. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the atonement that the sons of Aharon would do and still do is for the guilt incurred when we do sin. And I would suggest to you, because the work that it says that Yeshua did on the execution stake, the cross, was atonement, not forgiveness. So if he atoned, he was the firstborn, since the Most High commanded the sons of Aharon to atone for guilt, that he atoned for the guilt in our lives coming to him. And that's how come even after that atonement, we are still commanded to ask for forgiveness of sin. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Now, everything that Yeshua did, he followed everything that we've been taught about the offering system, about the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. Okay? Right down the line from beginning to end, he followed every tenet that was there as a shadow of what was above the tabernacle. He used that as a basis for everything that he did, all the way up to being raised from the dead and ascending back to the Father. Okay? So, this is not a new precedent. I'm just sharing with you at the moment.
Good.
Now, it says there in chapter 10, when Moshe heard Aharon, he approved. And then in the sixth reading, in chapter 11, 1 through 32, we are instructed in the dietary requirements of kashrut. What we can eat, what we cannot eat, what becomes food for us, and what is not considered food. Now, people come up with a lot of different ideas and explanations of why he requires us to have these dietary requirements. As Michael likes to say on occasion, the very first reason is because he commanded it. And no place in Scripture does it ever say that he withdrew that command. There's a place in the New Testament where it speaks of one of the followers of Yeshua, and it says in a dream that he has a large blanket brought to him with all sorts of food in it that says, what I have set apart, what I have made clean, that is clean. You don't have to go any farther with it. What people fail to understand is there was nothing taught in the New Testament that conflicted or compromised or changed Torah. All of the people who wrote the New Testament, the letters there, had all been taught Torah the same way. The only thing they did was plug Yeshua as the anointed salvation or the anointed one into it with what they taught him. But Yeshua didn't come to change Torah or to eliminate it. He came to make sure that it was lived correctly and fulfilled correctly. What it says in the writings of Matthew. Now, I'm sharing this with everybody now. I'm not just sharing this with John. The dietary requirements set us apart in our diets from among all the peoples of the earth, for one, because our set apartness away from all the other peoples of the earth are in and of itself layered. This is one aspect or one layer. Okay? Now, just to give you an example, the biggie that everybody likes to argue about is pork. It also says in the writings of the prophet Isaiah, Yeshayahu, that the Most High hates pig eaters. And he says they are in the graveyard with others. He says it even in the famous King James Bible, that the Most High literally hates pig eaters. Now, I'm not a legalist. I'm just sharing with you what it says. Ultimately, I ask a lot of people if they're willing to follow what the Most High says. Superficially, they say yes. But in day-to-day living, their actions in day-to-day life dictate a different answer. Well, it's not up to me to judge that. It's up to the Most High and his Torah, because it says his Torah actually judges, especially in the house of Yaakov. So I needed to make sure that we understood something of the dietary requirements that are there. Most of the dietary requirements are to save us from ourselves, because a lot of things that we don't consider food for us are actually scavengers of different kinds, either on land, such as uh, pigs and hogs, and the rest of it are like crustaceans and that are bottom feeders, such as catfish or crabs or lobsters, and they eat the dead. They'll eat just about anything, and we are taught to stay away from the dead. We don't even eat what is considered roadkill or been ripped and torn apart. So I'm not asking anybody to agree with what's written here. I am simply sharing that it is here. Well, we have a Frankie that has joined us. Shabbat shalom, Frankie.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Hello, welcome.
But, well,
Now, considering everything that's there in our dietary requirements, try to remember something. Everything in Torah, the Most High gave to us, He revealed to us. So it constitutes what comes from Him to us. Now, consider the Most High had revealed many different aspects of what He requires of us. This is only one of them. He told us not to light fires from sunset the 6th day of the week until after sunset of the 7th day of the week, our Shabbats. He's given us a few different things as requirements, not just the dietary laws. Now, in the 7th Aliyah, it also states around verse 24 of, I believe it's chapter 11, okay, that you shall be set apart because I am set apart. Now, if I did get that right, then please correct me. Now, we have a consideration. This consideration is in chapter 11, verse 44. It says, "For I am Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, your Elohim. Set yourself apart or sanctify yourselves and be set apart, for I am set apart. Do not defile your souls with any of the crawling thing creeping on the earth. For I am Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, who brings you out from the land of Egypt to be your Elohim. Be set apart, for I am set apart." Now, this is after most things that are part of our dietary requirements. So, I need to make sure that you've got an idea about this. Now, in verse 47 of chapter 11, it also says to distinguish between the clean and the unclean, or in English, the impure, the pure, between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. So, may I suggest that you take it into consideration?
Quick question, Rabbi.
Yes.
One that I've wondered about. In the instance of an animal that's been a clean animal, like a white-tailed deer in this instance, I had a situation one time where it got hit, but it didn't die. It broke a leg. And then later was shot. Is that clean for us to eat? By later, it was some 8 hours later, and the animal laid in the rest in the shade.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
In turn. When we or an animal suffers trauma, what chemicals and neurochemicals flood our system?
There's a nice cocktail: epinephrine, testosterone, the big cocktail.
So why do you think we are taught to slaughter our animals the way that we slaughter them?
It avoids that.
Yes. So if animals are flooded with these different chemicals through that trauma, are they still rendered okay to eat?
No,
No, because those chemicals cause toxins to go into the bloodstream and cause toxins to go into the nervous system and the musculature, as well as the organs. And usually it is the musculature of the animal that we eat. Now, if just from a simple workout, people get sore because of the lactic acid and they have other problems because of folic acid and other acids from workouts, what do you think is going to happen with an animal that has suffered trauma like that? Before you finally put it out of its misery, you kill it, and then you want to put it on the grill.
Well, even in the human body, that doesn't last forever. So that's why
That's true.
gave you
So,
the time.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you what, next time that you work out and you've got that lactic acid and everything built up, how long do you want us to wait before we shoot you?
Okay.
And I'm just applying a little bit of common sense here to help you to understand. There's reasons that we slaughter our animals the way that we do, to keep them in a certain
Absolutely.
state of being. Okay. So if that stasis is violated, they are not in the same condition.
True. It's interesting because slaughtering them so that they lose their blood, it's evacuated out of their body, is the only way that you can prevent those chemicals from entering into their musculature, because the body
Yes.
will react very, very quickly, and it still puts it into that blood, but then that blood is evacuated out of the body, and you can tell it when you taste the meat.
mhm.
Yes. So have I answered your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Does
We know
anybody
that-
else have any questions at all? Go ahead, Mike.
As a congregation a long time ago, we noticed that the animals that we had prepared kosher, we digested much easier. It felt like a light meal,
Mhm.
and they tasted clean. It didn't have a stronger taste, even though it was a goat, which is easy to offend people with the flavor of goat. And so I think when you get your meat from a mainstream source and it has a stronger meat flavor, Well, guess why it has that? Because the animal was being tortured as it died.
So I'll turn it back to you, Michael. So you can see what questions we may have or what kind of advice you can develop here.
Okay.
And forgive me for just a moment.
Oh, certainly. I'll give you a little bit more evidence, everyone. When I was in the military, I was stationed overseas in Japan. And at that time in Japan, I don't know what it's like right now, but most of the things that are prescription drugs in America, you could just walk into a pharmacy and buy off of the shelf. Like really strong antibiotics were just on the shelf, and you just, if you needed help, you asked for help. Otherwise, you just went over and picked it up and
In
checked out.
Mexico too. In Mexico too, you can buy many drugs that are prescription over the counter there.
Yep. So one of the things that they had was bovine testosterone that you could buy over the counter. And so lifting weights and getting big and strong was a popular thing. So guys would go out in town and buy this bull testosterone and consume it. And they could feel the effects within seconds. I mean, it does not take long. It was very prohibited to do. You didn't want to get caught. But it's so close that the blood tests, if you got, if someone suspected you of it, they, at that time, and this was in the early 90s, it wouldn't even be flagged when it show up. So if you think that I'm eating meat that hasn't been through a kosher kill and you're getting away with it, I'm telling you, the modern science doesn't back you up on that. And so, and the thing of it is, those hormones work in our bodies very similarly.
Well, did it help those guys to bulk up, the bodybuilders in Japan? I presume it did.
I don't know if the idea wasn't, it would not that it would help you bulk up. It would give you a rage in order to have the motivation to lift the weights. But all weightlifters know that you bulk up in your sleep. You don't bulk up in the gym. You bulk up with your diet and when you're sleeping, when you're resting and repairing. I don't mean to be nitpicky, but it gives you a rage to be able to go work out harder. Very dangerous. So what happens if you take those hormones, the glands in your body that would naturally produce those hormones withers and dies. They call it atrophy or to die.
Mhm.
So not a good idea. Anyone else have anything to add or comments, questions, observations?
A question on a different topic about which activities are kosher for the men besides like kippah.
Say it again. Which what?
Which head coverings are kosher for men besides kippahs and like the fedora?
Fireman's hats, cowboy hats, hard hats, stocking hats, the pan,
Swimmer's cap,
turbans. What's that?
swimmer's cap.
There you go. Yep.
with the chin strap.
There you go. Yep.
Whatever covers the head before the Most High.
Thank
It
you,
does not
Rabbi.
cover the face.
Yeah, I got a question, Rabbi.
Wait, just say, I'm sorry. Did you catch the last part of what he just said? Rabbi, will you repeat that, please?
I said anything can act as a covering on the head of a man before the Most High, but we're not to cover our face. No veils, nothing resembling a veil. We're not to cover our face, as Moshe
Right.
did for coming from the Most High.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Patrick.
Now, Messiah said he had to be lifted up.
That's true. He said that.
Now, would that be considered the elevation offering, or is that the wave offering?
You haven't done the research on that elevation offering yet. At the time that he said he had to be lifted up, what else did he say? That being lifted up, he would draw who?
All men.
Yes. Now, if you are involved in replacement theology, if you are involved in anti-Semitism, you're going to have a brand new definition of what that's going to mean. To begin with, Yeshua, as the anointed one, said he came from the law. He came here for the lost sheep of Israel.
Mhm.
That was a statement that is recorded that he said.
Mhm.
That's who he came for.
Right.
So that's a rather selective thing to say. And then to follow up after that to say, when I'm lifted up, I'll draw all men to me.
Mhm.
So, barring from replacement theology, barring from anti-Semitism, based on Michael, I gave you a paper, some 200, 300 pages long already. Have you distributed that to anybody yet?
Which 200-page paper are you referring to, sir?
One that a couple of ladies that studied under me called the Truth Paper.
Yes.
Okay, in that Truth Paper, I listed a bunch of references that show that anybody who wanted to come in covenant with Israel, with the Most High, what they would have to do. Anybody who chose to come live with us, follow Torah, live Torah, they went through a period of time until they were considered one of us.
Mhm.
But Yeshua said that when he was lifted up, he would draw all men to them. Try to remember, he was born a Jew in the tribe of Judah, one of the tribes of Israel. And whenever he was crucified, put on the execution stake, it was also said that he was king of the Jews.
Sure.
So if you want to, if you decide to honor what he said that he would draw you to him, well, then he's drawing you to him, not him to you. So wherever you are is not where he's going to come to you. Wherever you are is from where you got to come from to get to him. He said he would draw all men to him.
Correct.
That means when we desire him, for him to be inside of us, he is drawing us to him.
Right.
He does not become a Gentile. He does not become a pagan. He does not become anything else besides who he is, because he's already been honored as the lamb worthy to be slain.
Well, I was speaking
Okay.
in reference to the. I was speaking in reference to the offering system.
I know. I just need to make sure everybody understands this.
Oh,
Okay. Everybody that is drawn to him and everybody who accepts that they're drawn to him. And it also says that he's the head over the body, and that everybody who joins with him becomes a part of his body.
Right.
Well, if the head of him is a Jew, what's the body going to be?
Jewish.
Yes, absolutely. The body
Right.
won't be separate from the head.
No, can't be.
Okay. Yeshua said he would draw all men to him.
Hmm.
That means he's immovable. He is stationary from where he's at. And the men that come to him are coming from where they were to where he is at.
Right.
Everybody with me? Now he had to go from being an offering. He had to be an offering to follow all the tenets and instructions from the offering system.
Right.
And it was said afterward that he was the last acceptable sin offering.
Mhm.
Even though when the atoning work that he did on the cross was to rid us of our guilt, so we no longer had the wages that would cause our death, the wages of the sin. And yet we're still required to ask for forgiveness of sin after we receive his atonement.
Mhm.
Everybody with me? So, as him as an offering, he went through the stages of being an offering. Once that was accomplished, because he didn't just die, he laid down that life.
Right.
And he was able to pick it back up again.
Right. As he said he would.
Uh-huh.
And he
So
said
this
he had,
offering,
he had,
the
he
reason
said
is-
he had the authority to do so.
the reason this offering is so different is one, when she became pregnant, she had not been with a man. So when Yeshua was born from a woman, he was not born from a woman who had had a pregnancy from a man.
Right.
So Yeshua that's the reason he was called the last Adam. Okay. Now, as the last Adam, he was making changes in everybody who would be drawn to him and come to him
Right.
as the last Adam. Okay. Now, consider that he had to be more than an offering. When he went to the execution stake, yes, he was an offering. He dripped the blood down. There
Mhm.
was earthquakes. Those who had been long dead returned to their families. So once that always dead didn't really hold there, did it?
Mm-mm.
Now, Yeshua was also called the resurrection and the first of the resurrection, the first fruits of it. So we've got a lot of things going on here as a result of this execution stake.
Right.
A lot of different areas that are not popularly taught, they're not taught well, and they're not taught completely.
Hmm.
Okay? But they're all there. We get to them one at a time when time allows. Now, to answer your question affirmatively, it was a part of the offering system, yes.
Hmm.
But the offering system stopped with his laying down his life
Right.
before the Shabbat came in. Okay? Now, we don't have any part of the offering system to deal with any animal in the offering system that would be resurrected. However, we do have an example of an offering that before he died, he was replaced by a ram,
Hmm.
just to show obedience by a servant. That would have been Abraham and his son, Yitzchak. Okay?
Hmm.
So if we have an understanding, as people have heard me say so many times, of the offering system, we will have an understanding of the work that the Anointed One did, whether it was through the offering he made of himself while he was alive to death, on the execution stake and what he did before he picked up his life again, the difference in the life that he had before the execution stake and the 40 days he walked the earth before he ascended,
Mhm.
to show that he was indeed the Lamb worthy to be slain. Have I answered your question?
Sure.
Any other questions?
I was wondering about the woman in John 8, if that was added later, right?
Would you repeat the statement?
The woman caught in adultery in John 8, that was added later, correct?
Well, first off, let me tell you, that entire story was added later in Scripture. It was not a part of the original letter of John. And universally, anybody who studies will tell you the same thing.
Okay.
That story could not have happened the way that it says it happened. Just if anybody understands Hebrew culture, at that time especially, that story could not have happened because every man in his own house was honored in Israel. Nobody just walked into another man's house without an invitation or without him being home. Didn't happen. It was a part of our culture. Okay? In our culture, women don't have a right to divorce. And it's hard for a man to get a get. Okay? So we have a lot of different things within our culture that speaks to us. That story could not have happened because they said they caught the woman in the middle of that stuff. Where did they catch her? It didn't say. Number one, could have been in her house, could have been in that man's house that she was with in the story, because either way, nobody had a right to just go in somebody's house. And nobody had such a status to do that unless they were Roman. And this was not a Roman situation. Okay? Secondly, if a woman was caught, she would not have been taken to Yeshua. She would have been taken where? Before the Sanhedrin,
Mhm.
Great Assembly,
Right.
because that would have been a violation. You did not take somebody guilty of something to the king. You didn't take him to the high priest. You didn't take him to a priest. You didn't take him to a prophet. You took him before the Sanhedrin.
Mhm.
So no matter how you look at that story, okay, and then they throw the woman at his feet and say, well, what is your judgment? What is your ruling? What is your decision? The only ones that would have a right to try adultery would either be the priest of the firstborn, the judges that sit in the city's gates, and if they could not reach a decision, because they would be unable to reach a decision, they would push that up to the sons of Aharon, who were like the Supreme Court. They had the final decision, and there was no appeal to their decision. Yeshua being a firstborn, okay, he had the right of the firstborn as a priest, but until he became, by ascending to the Father, after the order of the righteous king, the high priest, he was not in a position of, in his Torah observance, to be able to judge the woman. He was in a position to forgive her sin, but not to judge her.
Right.
He did not fulfill the Torah requirements at that time to do that. And it would have been unheard of for the judges to sit at the city's gates to take a woman and instead of saying, where's the witness? Because they brought her to him, they didn't bring any witnesses. How could any judge judge a matter without the requirement of 2 to 3 witnesses? So there's all sorts of holes in this story that has been written in at a later date.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
It was one of those passages that were written in later. And if you research it, you'll be able to find that out pretty easy.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Okay. It's all yours, Michael. I guess Michael's not taking it away. Where did Michael go? I guess he had to do something for a moment. He took advantage, huh? He had to. When you got to go, you got to go. Now, anybody have any other questions? No other questions? Okay. I was hoping that we could understand this a little bit better. Has everybody got maybe even a little bit better understanding?
Yeah.
Yep.
In regard to that passage, Hananiah, if somebody went into a man's house without invitation or when he wasn't there, that would be the equivalent of more than an insult. Okay? That would be treating him as though he was not freeborn and he was a slave. And the house would have had to have been provided by the slave's master in order for anyone to be able to go into that house.
Hmm.
So what was common practice during those times? When somebody would be outside of the domicile, the house, and they would call from outside. They didn't have locks on their doors. They would call from outside because it was so taboo to go into somebody's house unannounced or uninvited. And if nobody answered from within, then they would say, is anybody home? If nobody answered at all, they would try to find somebody who could double check the matter, such as somebody from the Sanhedrin or one of the Kohanim or a teacher of Torah who was not even a son of Aharon. They were called morons. Okay, there he is. So does that help everybody understand that storyline a little bit? It's just all full of holes. There's more there, but I won't go into it all. Okay. During the time that Yeshua walked the earth as a man, the Sadducees were not teaching Torah publicly. The majority of the Sadducees were Kohanim, and they were more concerned with temple service with all their divisions. There was the Pharisees whose goal was to make sure everybody in Israel had an understanding of Torah. And that's how come everybody was able to admonish each other, remind each other about the essentials of Torah and whether or not somebody was forgetting something or not fulfilling something correctly. It was because of the Pharisees' teaching that they were able to do that. Okay? So it doesn't make sense that a Pharisee who lived by the Torah and total Torah observance, because we know that because even Yeshua had said that unless you are as righteous as a Pharisee, you don't have a chance. Okay, so we know the Pharisees would not have violated those mores and those tenures of our culture and society at that time because they were so necessary for them to be completely Torah observant on every part and every piece. They would not have entered somebody's home unannounced or uninvited. And if she had been involved in something like that, adultery, if they would have called out from outside the house or outside where they were at, what do you think they would have stopped doing? So how would they have been caught? So if they would have called out based on society's and culture's requirements, they would not have continued in that. All the woman, if it was a woman's house, all she would have had to say is, my husband is not here. He is such and such, or he's someplace. You'll have to go and speak to him there. That's all she would have had to say. If she was in the man's house, then all he had to do was say, I'm not disposed to offer hospitality at this moment. Could you please come back another time? I'm involved in something and I'm before the Most High. People just didn't burst in like that. All yours, Michael.
Well, Baruch Hashem. Must be talking about the story of the woman caught in adultery.
Yeah.
You know, that story is not even in the oldest text, in the oldest Greek text of the New Testament, much less the Aramaic.
That's true.
So even if you simply look at all those texts, it's modern invention, relatively speaking. So, well, what do you guys think? Go ahead.
I have a question. It's mildly unrelated, but we've been talking about the instance where Yeshua was speaking with the Pharisees, and he said, you are halting or preventing those who are ready to enter into the kingdom, and you do not enter in yourselves.
You have the keys and you won't use them and you won't let others use them either. Yeah. What's your question?
I was wondering if you could just expound on that a little bit.
What part?
Well, I understand that the kingdom is already here, just some people can't see it.
That's a true statement. What's the definition of the kingdom?
Righteousness and peace in the Ruach.
Got to do better than that. But you're right. Now he says it is peace, joy, and righteousness. So what Rav Shaul or Paul is defining is that the kingdom is made up of 2 or 3 parts. First is made up of fruit of the Spirit, including the Most High's attributes. Secondly, it's made up of his righteousness, and the only way for us to receive his righteousness, because the word for righteousness, tzedek, is also the word for justification when he judges. So when he justifies us and we wear his justification, we're wearing his righteousness, and we have fruit of the Spirit, and he's satisfied with us. That refers us back to 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 through 13. If you read verse 11, after we've matured, it says that Yeshua offers us an open door into the kingdom once he's satisfied with us. But verses 3 through 10 is where we are maturing to the point to where Yeshua is satisfied with us and he offers us an open door into the kingdom. Yes, the kingdom is here. He brought the kingdom with him, but it isn't given automatically. When a person accepts Yeshua, they're not in the kingdom yet. They have salvation and they're on the path, which is why Shaul, or as Paul says, run the race to the end. Don't stop. Okay? We are taught about the fruit of the Spirit and the story of the vine in John 15. There's quite a bit to take in there. We're taught about how Yeshua himself commands the Spirit to go forth from the Father. So you really have to put it together, because if we got the kingdom automatically, why would it say in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 11, that Yeshua, when he finds us acceptable, opens the door to the kingdom up and offers us an entrance into the kingdom? Because in verse 3 through 10, there's a maturing process that people have to go through. Because it says in verse 10, if you're lacking in any of these things, you're barren. But if you're abounding in any of these things, then it says that he'll open the door to you. You read it for yourself. 2 Peter chapter 1, 3 through 13, 3 through 14. So the kingdom is defined by Rav Shaul, by Paul. And in Galatians, it mentions a inclusive list of fruit of the Spirit. In another place, fruit of the light is mentioned. The only way we get fruit of the light is once we're in the kingdom. So fruit of the Spirit carries us from the beginning of our relationship with the Most High through Yeshua. The fruit of the Spirit grows us as it grows to the point that Yeshua finds it acceptable. He offers us an entrance into the kingdom. We make the choice to accept it or not. We go into the kingdom and we start working with both fruit of the Spirit and fruit of the light. But there's nothing else revealed about that, so we can't talk more about it.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question?
I guess I didn't really have a specific question as much as I was curious about the not entering and preventing others. who are
Oh, the keys. Oh, that's pretty easy too. Not to worry. As the Aussies like to say, no worries, mate. Okay. All through Torah and the prophets, he gave us keys. They already had them. Okay. When it says love your neighbors, you love yourself, that's fruit of the Spirit. When it says to be at peace, shalom, that's fruit of the Spirit. When it says, how many times do we forgive our brother? 470 times a day. Okay. That takes patience. That takes humility. That takes kindness. That takes compassion. That takes mercy. Okay. All that, it takes all that just to forgive. That's all fruit of the Spirit. Get a better idea? When the marriage ceremony that I made years ago has nothing like it does in most people's marriages. When people make a vow with each other in marriage and they say, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, when you make those vows, in Torah it says all vows have to be paid to the Most High. When you vow to be healthy and you vow to be sick, and each other got to go through that for each other, then that means that's got to be paid. When you vow to have your finances in order and you vow not to have your finances in order, richer or poor, that means you're vowing to go through that. So it's got to be paid to him.
Mhm.
Everything that you vow has to be paid. Okay? So we have keys that have been built into Torah concerning fruit of the Spirit, the attributes of the Most High, how we are supposed to be lovingly obedient, how he receives us. He's given us keys and how to live with each other and how to be lovingly obedient, to be Torah observant. Okay? So even though well-studied Pharisees knew these things, they did not enter in, and they did not give others the keys for them to enter in. And he told them so. Instead, they set up greater walls and greater boundaries to show the studious ones were in control. Well, no, they didn't get any money for it. The only ones that would receive money were the sons of Aharon, the Kohanim, because the Most High set in motion in Torah, the only ones that you give contributions to, the only ones you give offerings to in Israel, Israel being the people, not a land, okay, is the Kohanim. It says, because they officiate for me. They represent me to Israel. So you give to them, and I allow them to keep it. Okay? So the Pharisees, they didn't get rich off of people's contributions. It was the Sadducees that got money because the majority of Sadducees were Kohanim. And they received contributions. They received the half shekels for the Mishkan's maintenance and the temple's maintenance. They received other contributions, other offerings. It says in Proverbs that your wages and profits, you tithe from them. You tithe from your food, you tithe from your wages and earnings, your profits, you tithe from everything and anything that comes into your hand. Which means that you do not tax, you do not tithe from pre-tax dollars. Say, for example, your pre-tax wage is $1,000 a week. You cannot give money that never comes to you. So when they take out taxes on you, they take out Social Security on you, they take out whatever they take out, that money never makes it into your hand. You cannot give a tithe from what never gets to you. You can only give a contribution from what comes into your hand. You have to receive it before you can do something with it.
Or if you're a business owner and you withhold your own taxes.
Well,
still
eventually they
applies.
got to be paid.
Yes,
So you still have to wait till you pay them before
right.
you can do anything else with them.
Yep.
Does that help you, Hananiah?
Yes,
Does
thank
that
you.
help you?
It clarified some things, yes.
Okay, good.
So the Pharisees were not teaching those?
They were teaching Torah, every aspect of Torah that they could. But the Pharisees, for the most part, were not receiving contributions, because the only ones that could receive contributions or offerings were the sons of Aharon.
No, concerning
Everybody
the
knew
keys to the concerning the keys to the kingdom, they were withholding some part of Torah.
Oh, yes. They, in rabbinical Judaism, they still do it.
Sure.
I should know. Whenever it was a requirement for 72 rabbis to write the Greek Septuagint, each one of them in separate places made the same mistakes all at the same time. That's because we're all taught not to reveal certain things to anybody else outside of Israel.
Mm.
It wasn't just one or two of them that made the same mistakes. It was all of them that made the very exact same mistakes. The exact same letters, the exact same words. So, yes, there's things that were not taught. And Yeshua called them on it. However, I don't do that. Neither is a Kohen, nor is a rabbi.
Todah Rabbah.
Rabbi Kishan. I'm also a firstborn. Well, Baruch Hashem, that's all I have.
Good, Sam.
Baruch Hashem.
All yours, Michael.
Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Okay, is there any other comments? Contributions? Tana, if you ever find those references for the instruction for a Kohen to drink wine when teaching the house of Yaakov, I'd be interested in them.
Yes, I found where it told him to teach the house of Israel. It was in today's Torah portion, which is 11 and hold on. I wrote it down. 11 is the end of this week's Torah portion.
Okay.
11:44 something like that. Let me see. Let me go back to it. I got it. I just highlighted it.
Well, Anna, did you hear what his request was of you?
Yeah, the one where he does both. He wants House of Israel and House of Yaakov. So I got to find House of Yaakov. I got it. I'll be ready next week. Thank you. I found where he said he's going to fulfill, but I can find. I have to go back and read because I think it's right in there with that.
Okay.
My eyes on it right now.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Sure.
You okay, John?
You see it, Michael? 11 and 44, 45. Wait a minute. Let's see. Hold on. I highlighted it in one book. 1 second. I have 2 or 3 Bibles.
No, not in the text I'm working with. I don't see it.
Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna go back. Yeah, that's the setting apart. Wait a minute. Oh, here it is. It's 10 and 11. I was wrong. Forgive me. Leviticus 10 and 11. And then in verse 8, it tells them, do not drink.
Gotcha. Do not drink wine or intoxicating drink, neither you nor your sons with you, when you shall enter the tent of meeting, so you shall not die. It is an everlasting statute for your generations to distinguish between the holy or set apart and profane, between the impure and the pure, to teach the children of Israel all the statutes that Hashem had spoken to them through Moshe. Got it.
And that's only during the offering service, Michael.
It's only during the offering service?
Yes. As you read here in today's parashah, through each offering, it has an actual service. It has a pattern. It has a sequence. So when you're involved in that offering service, no drinking.
Right.
Okay.
John,
Here.
everything good?
Yeah,
No comments?
we've had a
I got
long
one
day.
comment.
Say again, John. Hold on, Patrick.
Okay.
said we have had a long day.
Well, enjoy the rest of your evening and get some rest, sir.
I will. This when the class is over. I think I'll take a siesta.
Yeah, it's just about done. Patrick, what were you gonna say?
In respect to Aharon not eating his portion, was that just how he was feeling about the death of his 2 sons? He didn't feel like it would be right for him to do that.
There's no way that you can speculate on that. There's no premise for it. Okay. Besides which, he was specifically told not to mourn, not to show any outward sign of mourning.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that.
No, what he was really saying was, when you get so many offerings coming in, it can be difficult to eat of every one.
Sure.
Nobody has a stomach that big.
Okay.
That's also why they have the definitions in there. Some of them, they will have to eat in a sacred place, set apart place. some they could share with their family, some they could share with the owner of the offering, etc.
Right.
So they would be happy after a while to share with others because you're not just doing one offering a day.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about that last week, Michael? About
Yeah.
how many people would have had to pay.
What if it's the third bowl for that day? You gonna eat that one too? You know?
Well, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
But the Torah also teaches us when we are unable to eat that, how it has to be burned, but not on the altar.
Oh, okay.
When something has been set apart like that and it's acceptable, and we are unable to eat it the way it's prescribed to, it has to be burned, but not on the altar.
In a clean place.
Uh-huh.
Very good. Well, thank you for that lesson, Rabbi. I certainly learned a lot.
What did you learn?
More of the details about the offerings. So I'm going to look up more about that, the asham or the guilt.
It says it in Numbers chapter 5.
Okay.
In Numbers chapter 5, if you'll start in Numbers chapter 5, verse 11, it says, Yehovah spoke to Moshe saying, oh, no, I take that back. Look at verse 5.
Okay.
Yah spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel, any man or woman who commits any of the sins of man by acting treacherously against Yehovah, and that person is found guilty. Okay? So whatever sin we commit, we acting treacherously against the Most High by disobeying his teaching, and we incur guilt.
All right.
They shall confess their sin that they committed, and he shall restore the principal guilt payment and add its fifth to it, and give it to the one against whom he was guilty, etc. It's mentioned in several places. That's one of the most common.
All right.
Okay? Different translations will read it a little bit differently. Now, I will say this to you. Okay? That when we sin against one another, the one who does the sinning and he breaks faith with the Most High for that sin, it starts what Torah also teaches as time and service, or sometimes translated time of warfare. So until you receive atonement for that sin, until you receive forgiveness for that sin, you've got two lines of time and service. One for you for that person you sinned against, and one between you and the Most High because you acted treacherously against his teaching and you broke faith with him. So until there's that atonement done for the guilt and forgiveness for the sin, then that time and service continues against you. Okay? It's mentioned in chapter 40 of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, when it's talking about the time and service that Jerusalem had to go through. When it mentions comfort her, my people, it says, please let Jerusalem know that her time in service has ended and she has suffered twice over. It's the only time in all the scripture it's mentioned. Now, if you consider for a moment that this was plainly understood during the time of our people from ancient times, even when Yeshua walked the earth. This was common knowledge. And when you sin against somebody, you would incur guilt. Okay? Everybody knew this. So it was important for Yeshua's followers to point out to people at the time, before there was a New Testament, that what Yeshua did on the execution stake was atonement. And once they had received that atonement, they got a clean break, a clean slate. They had been made clean again, and all the guilt had been atoned for, and that they should ask for forgiveness. That's taught in numerous places in the New Testament, Red Hadashah. It's just not normally interpreted that way through Protestants and Catholics alike. Okay? Because of the way they've been taught for so long. But everything that's written in the New Testament is all based on the Tanakh. They didn't have anything to talk about if they didn't have the Tanakh. So, Baruch Hashem, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for helping with that. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's Strong's number 816, 817. If you're used to using Strong's numbering system, it's translated into English as quite a few different words. So if you're going to do it the old-fashioned way, by using your concordance, you're going to have to look up quite a few different words to chase down. That's one thing why it's easier to learn some Hebrew, to work from the Hebrew side of things. Some Hebrew words are translated into 100 different English words. So you have no idea of what's really being said behind your English translation. So it's really nifty when you can hop the fence and work from the Hebrew side. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. They're all common knowledge. So okay, anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, we'll stop it right there.